This is the Why Can't We Be Friends panel. We are dealing with how records and singles and artists break on radio and on streaming and how labels deal with that. So I'm going to start with a question that I'm going to pose to Kristen, which is, hypothetically and generically speaking, if you're starting a track, it's a brand new track, you're working with this artist, you want this track to be the biggest hit in the world, where do you start? Do you start with streaming? Do you start with radio? Do you have a campaign that builds in a timeline with both? Give me sort of the chronology of that, please.
You're throwing me right into the fire, right out of the gate. Okay.
You start it.
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot in that one question. First of all, for those who know me, they know that I've been at Warner for 20 years. Very fortunate to be in one place. And if you'd asked me that question 20 years ago, the answer would have been a lot different. 20 years ago, radio drove the marketing plan. Without question, if you didn't have a song on the radio, you didn't have a career. 20 years later, we certainly have reversed where radio fits in the marketing plan. And now don't get me wrong, because I know that this is a large room of radio folks. Radio still plays an enormous part of what we do, but it's just where it fits in the marketing plan. So to start, obviously, we get our songs up in the streaming platforms. But in many cases right now, people are discovering music through social media, through TikTok. They're stumbling into it on playlists. And then when we have a proven story, that's when we want to bring it to radio. Radio promotion is expensive. It takes time, takes a lot of effort, and it's not good to stumble out of the gate. So we always want to put our best foot forward, and by having the data and the streaming to back it up, we would lead with streaming and then go to radio.
So Travis, how does it make you feel to hear that you guys are sort of towards the end, whereas maybe things would have been different potentially 20 years ago?
Well, let me tell you something. And I got no heat with the people up here, very smart. Honestly, I'm fine with it, and other people may not agree with that opinion, but y'all throw so much shit against the wall. I'm happy that you're bringing it to streaming first so they can sort out a lot of it, because I don't want to deal with most of it. And by the time it gets to me or my team, we're sorting out the best of the stuff they're throwing against the wall. So I am very happy for you that you have so many tools to try and bring your artists to the world. See, no heat.
Thank you.
We're all friends, no heat.
That was the greatest answer. MTK,
Yeah.
to follow up on that, so I guess you're in the category of sorting through all the shit. Sorry, that's not how I should put it.
I don't release shit, just to be clear.
Sorry. You started it, Travis. But my point is that you are earlier in the process, and there is more content to sift through. And so I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit on the opposite side of the question that I asked Kristen, when she or other labels bring new tracks to you. Tell me sort of what process that goes through before it goes on your playlists.
Yeah, so I think that Luminate published last year that there's 120,000 tracks that get uploaded to services every single day. That's not only in country, but that is every single day. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot. We clearly could never handle 120 tracks, manually. But I will say, at Amazon Music, we have these guidelines that help us do business internally and externally, and they're called leadership principles. And at Amazon, our number one leadership principle is called customer obsession. And so we're constantly looking at what the customer is obsessed with. And in this case, it's the country consumer. So we're looking at the marketplace. We're figuring out through different data points that we have in our Amazon Music for Artists tool, whether it's our voice data that we have through Alexa, or whether we're looking at what sales are doing in the market, or our curators and our entire team are constantly looking at what is happening in the marketplace, whether it is on socials, and then being able to pivot and super serve that customer. So whatever that data is, I don't think there is a one size fits all. Every single track does this thing and then this thing and then this is where it goes. Tracks start in numerous different places at numerous different speeds, but we're very cognizant, and what we like to do and what we believe in is really super serving that country consumer and letting them guide where those tracks end up, the speed at which they move, and then we have very, very talented curators that also use their gut and their talent and the passion for the music industry to also see where those are going to start and then very quickly get those data points to either back that up or not back that up and be able to pivot, which then truthfully helps our entire genre with, you know, finding those proven hits and making sure that our genre is being uplifted by these super fans leaning in and us all consuming the music that we love.
Got it. I'm going to skip you for just 1 second, Kristen. I'm going to get back to Travis, and I'm wondering if you could.
Oh, good.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process by which your stations decide to add songs in country on their playlists, and where does streaming data come in, and where do other kinds of metrics come in?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we try and play the good ones more and the not so good ones less. But I'll share an opinion, and look, I'm certainly wrong a lot, but I think a lot of PDs go, this one good, it at top of list, must be good, and that's not how you should approach those streaming reports. Everybody in this room gets like 50 of them a day. But, and again, my opinion, I think what's really important is, I don't know if Mike Moore is in the audience, but if you were to ask him what an average song streams in his market, he'll probably tell you, I don't know, but he does know, and he knows to the exact number. And the point of that is that there's always going to be streaming in these markets. It's really, really, really important to know where stuff lives when it's just kind of average, because it's always going to be there. So don't get focused on rank. Get focused on when you add a record and you see it move. Like if you pay attention to I've explained this shitty a million times to Kristen, but she's followed it. Like, if you can just follow where the streaming lives in your market, you will see certain things happen almost absolutely. You know, like Michelle and them get on something and it starts to become familiar and then we jump it, you will see it rise if it's worth anything. And if it isn't, I'm not saying it's worth nothing. I'm just saying that you really need to know where average streaming lives in your market and not just go, oh, number one, I should play that. Because there's often records in that top 5 or 6 that, okay, they're great streaming records, but our game is trying to get people to sit through something 3 minutes at a time. And just because it's ranked number 4 in a streaming report, there's not a straight line there, man. So get granular with your streaming reports is my point.
Kristen, when you hear that, and it sounds like you've had conversations with Travis and others about this, how do you respond to that? Like, is that something that's easy to respond to and sort of have an action plan, or is it a little bit, ambiguous?
It's a challenge to hear it at times, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we worked a Zach Bryan single that was the hottest thing on the planet, and radio, for the most part, didn't wanna touch it. And that is because, sonically, it didn't fit, if you were to ask an average PD, what they were looking for on the radio at that time. And so and that's just one example. My job and the job of my team is to constantly find what will move the needle. And if it's not just a streaming number, right, I always say you have to talk about things in context. 5 million streams a week, well, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? Maybe it's 5 million streams a week and also two sold out shows at the Pinnacle. I was just talking about Gavin Adcock at our lunch earlier today, streaming very well. But I wouldn't say that the streams right now on his tracks are over-indexing. It's not the biggest thing on the planet, but the guy is selling some hard tickets. And so it's about taking all of the different data points. We talked about social media and the followers, the people who are discovering, and UGC, it's a big deal. And so taking all of that information and wrapping it up and then bringing it back to Travis, bringing it really even to MTK and her team, we're just constantly trying to tell the story and why it makes sense and why people need to pay attention.
I'm going to ask this next question to both MTK and Travis, and starting with MTK, which is, data is obvious. When you see something that has strong data, it's ranked highly, lots of people are listening to it, you know you want to emphasize that track just objectively. But then you've got less objective criteria. You've got ears, you've got feel, you've got instincts. When does that come in, and how does that sort of play out when you're building playlists and so forth?
We have music meetings, and like I said, we have these extremely talented curators that also plays playlist music for us. I think you always have to be looking at the marketplace and then trusting these subject matter experts. We are all passionate about the music that we love and that we lean into, and so there is 100% gut still matters. 100% gut still matters. And then kind of to Kristen's point, there's also those like, are they selling out? They're selling hard tickets. That matters. That's a point where a fan is leaning in. Or what are their merch numbers? What's happening with vinyl sales? What are those points that maybe don't translate to an airplay chart or a streaming chart? Like all of those little kind of tweaky moments that we can see, because really all of us up here as stewards of the genre, we are, and everyone in this room as stewards of the genre, like we are making country music history together. And so when there is a song that comes along and it just gets you in that gut, that could be a timestamp on someone's life, whether it's a wedding or a funeral or a new baby, whatever that is, like if you feel that in your gut, someone else is gonna feel that. And so if we then get to take a chance on that song and get that into someone's device or into their streaming playlist or whatever, and they get to discover it, like that's the best feeling in the world. So really, there's not one size fits all, and all of those data points are not. So really, we're kind of looking at everything and then hoping it hits.
Yeah, makes sense. Travis, tell me about your ears. Where do they come into the equation of what song gets played and what song doesn't, and your colleagues too?
Well, I'll speak for the company I work for specifically, which is part of why I was excited to join the Cumulus team. There's a lot of art involved in what we do, and the data either backs up our art or it doesn't. But if you don't, I agree with everything that Michelle said, by the way. But if you don't take chances, you're going to have a boring-ass radio station. And my opinion, like I know there's some people in the room you're being told to do by what to do by people above you. That'll sink you, man. Don't be... Take it from the guy that's been fired a million times and do it your way and create some art and do some cool-ass shit, and you'll be surprised how well it goes. Because ultimately, if you're successful, they ain't going to fire you. Just say the right stuff. But I think we don't focus on the art enough, and that's part of radio's problem, my opinion. I'm sure there's people that would disagree. We need more art, and then use the data to either back it up or not. But you've got to know what your brand is. One of my biggest issues is it used to be you could drive across the country and without hearing a jock or any sort of branding, you know where you were. And you still do. You pull into Dallas, Texas, you know that's a Mike Preston radio station because it sounds like Texas. I drive all over the country watching my kid play baseball, and there's many times I'm like, what state are we in? Because we just listened to 11 radio stations that are exactly the same. That has to be fixed, and the only way to do it is art. Yeah. So.
So what do you do when Kristen or somebody else from a label comes to you and says, this song is huge, the numbers show it's huge in streaming, but maybe it doesn't quite fit your station or your stations, and how do you sort of, what is that conversation like?
All right, so everybody has different opinions. I think if I wasn't on this stage and you asked Kristen that question, she would say Travis hates all of this TikTok pop bullshit, and he doesn't even want to hear it, because I don't. I've got a Waylon Jennings flag.
I'll say it. Travis hates TikTok pop bullshit.
I've got a Waylon Jennings flag hanging in my office, not because of...
We saw that.
True story, Chris and I have had many conversations, but it's never been a full-blown showcase showdown. It's always been very reasonable, very poignant. But yeah, what I'm trying to do here in Nashville is very different than what one of my guys might be trying to do in Fresno or Dallas or Atlanta. And so I don't think one size fits all. And that's okay. We can still have the conversation about the pop record, because I'm going to pass it on to my guys that need to play that stuff. And the truth is, if I was still in Colorado, I would be more about it, even though it's not my personal taste, because it's well accepted there. But in Tennessee, which is the South, we got to fix this, man. And no disrespect to anybody that's doing all the TikTok and pop stuff, but go work them to AC, not me. You know, so we have very honest conversations. It's not ever heated. I can't say that about all labels, but I find Kristen to be exceptionally smart and exceptionally reasonable. I don't get that with everybody else, but I get it with Kristen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll just, you know, the dialogue between the two of us is always civil, as he mentioned. And when I'm faced with opposition, or when my team is faced with opposition, we go, okay, we're going to leave it there, and we're going to go find someone else who's going to break it for us. And then give it some time to prove itself, and then I'll bring it back to Travis. And I will say, I know you didn't like it at first, but look what's going on.
At Amazon Music. Look what's going on at Amazon Music.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, and the truth is, I've been wrong plenty of times, and I told Kristen, well, I was wrong on that. You know, I think it's literally the worst thing I've ever heard, but the audience loves it, so we're going to go on it. You know, it's not up to me. It's what the people want to hear. It doesn't really matter what I think, if we're being honest. But we're reasonable, but that's where this comes in. Right. You know, look, if we don't want to go on it, she's got other places to go, and I'm all for that. I know some people in the audience aren't. They look at streaming as competition, but my take is still, if my guys telling jokes in between songs can't be more interesting than a playlist, we're not that fucking good, man. So we've got to, this all works together, and it all has its place. So I'm glad she has this avenue to prove us wrong.
Well, and I will say, too, I'm not out to prove anyone wrong, necessarily. I'm just out to break hits. And I think that we would all agree that the best magic happens when we are all aligned, right? And so, you know, if something is clicking at streaming and I bring it to, we see it early, and I bring it to radio, and they're like, yes, we're in, and those two things rise together, that's golden. That's, you know, the dream scenario and what I hope to see all of the time. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. But that certainly is the goal.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I love when she proves me wrong, because it's another thing we can play that can help us win. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with being wrong. It's fine.
You know, in fairness, I've asked you whether streaming data is influential on your choices, Travis, but MTK, does it go in the reverse? If a radio station jumps on something at a certain point in a hit song cycle, is that influential on the way you place it in Amazon Music? Do you think about that?
You know, depending on when the song, like the cycle of the song, not to pull from other panels that are here, but, you know, one of the things that we see happen more likely is that we've been on a song for quite a while, and it's built the familiarity that Kristen needs to then take it to radio. And we might be on the next song from this artist and kind of riding that momentum and getting that started. But we will sometimes see that when a song is in top 15, top 10 at radio, we will sometimes see that voice data come back. So we're seeing, you know, via Alexa or via their devices that they're asking either by genre, by artist, by song, or by lyric. And so if we start seeing that song popping again, then again, going back to customer obsession and that customer consumer, then we absolutely will put it back in to playlists, because the consumer, again, is telling us that they're obsessed with that. They would like to hear it. So to Kristen's point, when you do have sales, streams, and airplay going at the same time, that's when our genre wins. And that's really when that crazy magic happens. But I also think that the magic of streaming and what we're able to do, too, is in this kind of building of a song model, there are many times where we're able to start the momentum of a new song and then be able to start it, get that familiarity, and then that artist just continues, and that momentum continues getting better, and the familiarity gets better, and the airplay gets better, and the sales get better, and then that's when you see careers build.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in, I don't want to
Please
take this, but we're living a real-time example of what Michelle just said with Cole Swindell. Cole Swindell has a song at radio called Forever to Me that is now inside the top 10. It is researching, it is working. But it took us almost a year to get there. And if you go back to when we released the song, our streaming partners were all in early on. And frankly, it has a life cycle and a lifespan, and they had to come off of it because the audience wants fresh, they want something new, and they want it faster. And so in real time right now, we are finally back into the release cycle of Cole Swindell as we lead into an album later this summer. And I'm having two separate conversations. I'm having one with Travis about a researching record on the radio, amen. And I'm also having a conversation with MTK and her Amazon team and all of our streaming partners about Kill a Prayer, which is a song that we just released 2 weeks ago. And she's leaning in there and starting to build that familiarity and warming up his fan base as we get to the album. And now that we are inside the top 10, I'm always bringing that data, always bringing that radio data back to our streaming partners. I always want them to know what we have going on the radio side, because it's very important to me that, again, you have a holistic picture of what the ultimate plan is, whether it's radio, streaming, or any other facet of what we do day to day.
Let's talk about Forever to Me, the Cole Swindell song that you just referred to. And I may have old information here because I was looking up the Billboard chart data. It's currently number 11 on Hot Country Airplay, and it's number 28 on the Hot Country Songs chart. And I did see, excuse me for referring to Spotify because that's where you can see the data, but 13.2 million Spotify plays. So I wonder if we could use this as a little bit more of a specific chronological case study of how this works. So maybe step by step. So Kristen, you went to MTK's team and you said, here's a great new song. Can you add it to some playlists? Let's start there. What did that conversation sound like?
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks ago.
Are you talking about the new track? Or
No,
are you
I was talking about
Oh,
Forever to Me because
Sorry.
that's the one that I just gave the
Yeah,
data for.
to be honest with you, I should have looked at this before I walked in here. I can't remember the month that we released the song, but I want to say it was in April of last year.
That's right. That's what I saw.
Yes,
That's correct. You
alright.
nailed it.
And so in April of last year, we went day and date with the song to radio at the same time that we released it to streaming partners on that particular Friday. We got the lists that we were hoping for out of the gate, and we got the radio airplay started. But that's where it stopped, right? Within weeks, months of working that track, the streaming, and the momentum behind the playlisting continued, and we were grinding it out on the radio side. It just really slowed down. And this is not uncommon. I think there's any label people in the room, this is actually more commonplace than not, I suppose. And so over the course of those months, we were giving Travis and the radio team the data, and trying to continue to build that momentum. And at some point, they were like, we got to move on. We got to move on. And so we started to come off of those streaming playlists, which ultimately then, as you guys know, our streaming numbers went down, which made it even harder to work the record and point to the momentum. Ultimately, what ended up driving the success of that track and what continues to drive the success is radio research at the end of the day. And we started to get stories, and that's where the momentum started to build again. And then fast forward to what we were just referring to as far as new music is concerned. My job is to keep the fans engaged. And when we release an album from Cole, my job is that they're ready for it. I want them bumping into Cole Swindell music in any way they can find it. And that's kind of the balance of where we find ourselves.
That's so interesting. Forgive me, MTK. I'm going to skip to Travis on this, and then I will come back to you. Travis, tell me about...
Maybe you shouldn't, because I'm cocked and
I
loaded
saw
over
his
here.
face.
No, I'm curious about that because I think I just heard you say, Kristen, that you went with that song Forever to Me, whenever it was, April of last year, you went to radio first, and they were interested at first, but then there was a dip. And I just wonder what you remember, Travis, in when you were dealing with that song.
The panel you should do next year is, why are there so many pretend number ones that clog up the chart and make it take a year to get to number one? I mean, legit, we get nailed.
I'm okay with that. Let's talk about
I mean, and I'm not taking shots at Kristen, but here's the deal. Michelle drops a record. There's no heat. We're off 5 spins. It's the end of the world. But we got to wait for these other 75 records to have their pretend number one. And if they were real, they'd be sitting at the top like Jelly Roll is right now, versus they get number one and then they fall off the face of the earth. And so we got to fix that before we have a real conversation. I mean, it's great that all of you collaborate together and you play nice, but I imagine no scenario where Rod's calling me and going, hey man, can I win next week? And I'll go, yeah, cool, if I can win the week after that. I mean, what a bunch of horse shit. If we can fix that, we can fix a lot of the problems
in the
that are
room?
up here.
If Tom Martins is in the room, this is where he would stand up and say, Travis, you hold the cards.
Easy to say. Easy to say.
Okay, some things to unpack there, but first of all,
You're never going to invite me again, and I'm fine with that. That's all right.
I'm happy to have you.
Okay.
Saves me from doing more work. So fake number ones. Can you explain what that concept means?
Yeah, man. Any other format, they duke it out. And you know what? Sometimes they go, man, we were number 2. And the world doesn't stop spinning, and everybody's fine. But in this format, I don't know if it's a beautiful thing that everybody gets along even though they're competitors, and it's like, oh, we'll let you go for it next week, and we'll go the week after that. What I'm very confused about is why look, we want to be partners to you. You know that. And we certainly help you with a lot of your pushes, so maybe I'm guilty of the same thing, if we're being honest. But a lot of these number ones, they get to number 1, and then they fall off the face of the earth, and nobody ever plays them again. That probably wasn't a great idea to begin with. That's probably a miss on all of our parts. But it does help build careers, which I guess you could argue helps her and us. And so, I don't know what we do about that, but it shouldn't take a year for a good song to get to number 1. And there are we did the math, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but there's like 6 artists that have had a number 1 in less than 20 weeks, roughly, right? So the others took way longer than that, like 50 some weeks is the average. We got to fix that. You want to know why the format continues to decline? It's that. It's that. Fix that. I promise we'll go up. Fix it. You can speak to that. People get bored easy. So we on my side are like, people get bored easy, so let's slow it down. It's dumb. We got to fix it. Got to fix it.
Do you want to talk about that, MTK? Because I have some more questions, but I'd rather hear you talk.
I mean, I don't know if there was a question in there, but yeah, I will say, like, we, again, listening to our customers like new music discovery. They do. And if they are looking for, those gold records or those catalog records, we have incredible playlists that are called Rediscover playlists. And so you can rediscover artist hits too. There's also ways of discovery when you ask for a song or you type in a song, depending on how you've asked or where you're going. It can also take you into kind of sounds like, right? Like you go to Cole Swindell and maybe there's a sounds like, or you like this artist, you might also like this artist. So there's constantly new discovery, but to Kristen's point earlier, definitely we are finding that the country consumer and the country fan is definitely consuming music faster. So you will see it move faster in streaming, but we also have, great hits that are on these other playlists, and I think that's the beauty of streaming. As a massive country fan since the day I was born, having over 100 million songs at my fingertips is my favorite thing in the world.
Let's go back to fake number ones. It seems like from the reaction here, everybody understands this concept, but it's kind of new to me, so bear with me. Are you familiar with this concept, Kristen? And
Yes, Kristen, enlighten us as to how some of these number 1 pushes work.
I can speak
Maybe we
to
can't be
what you're
friends.
referring to as a fake number 1. And it is different in between the formats. To Travis's point, in other formats, the song's not working, they're going to come off of it, they're going to move on to the next one much faster than we typically do still in this format. We are trying to get better about that. It is a hard thing to change the way an industry has been, built. And frankly, the country format continues to be fixated, for lack of a better word, on country radio. And we're a small town. Nashville is a very small community. And we work artists, and we have personal relationships with publishers and songwriters. And even if you don't have a personal relationship with it, we have business relationships with these individuals. And number 1 records mean something. They help you get on to the right tour. It helps my A&R team get more music shared with us from the publishing community because they look at my team and they say, Kristen and her team can get it done. If you want a number 1 record, go to Warner Music Nashville. So it still is very important from that angle. Are they fake number 1s? We've put some pushes together, yes, where we have to push from 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 in order to ring the bell and get the heck out. But that's the point. The point is to ring that bell so that we've got the stat and then we can move on. I agree it's antiquated. I agree it should be fixed, but it's like turning the Titanic around at times. So.
But we could, if everybody got on board, we could.
I agree.
We could. We're not gonna, but we could. It's nice to say.
Let me be devil's advocate, going back to Forever to Tell for a second. I mean, for a person from the outside not knowing the machinations about that song and how it was promoted and how it was received, it seems like when it first came out, it hit radio and did well, but then it dropped off for a while. And over time, it showed some resilience. And now it's kind of slowly but surely driving back up the charts in a way to being a hit with more longevity. That seems like maybe a happy spin, but also maybe the truth. Travis, do you think that's a fair way to look at that particular track's journey?
Yeah, we messed that one up, for sure. I think radio was slower on it than we should have been. And then you compound it with there's stuff in front of it that clogs up the chart. But I only have one group of many that compose that mess that is the chart. You know, the landscape is changing. I've been in my job 10 minutes. There's a group of us that jump everything early, get super aggressive so we can get a read on it. That's been enough to push some of this stuff forward, but I would say, I mean, I'm not bagging on anybody. Look, you all have your theories on how you should get the most audience, but most aren't that way, right? I mean, you deal with all of them, I don't, but yeah, I think admittedly we have been slow on that Cole song, and look, I think it's important to admit when you get it wrong.
I think it's also important too, I mean, the Cole track is one of many that were released last year, and last year we found ourselves in a very unique situation with big releases. We had a Shaboozey track that was screaming in every which way. We had Post Malone dropping songs left and right, you know, and of course Morgan Wallen continues to have 3 or 4 songs working at any given moment. And so when you have that kind of competition, and you've got an artist like Cole who has staying power, he's got proven hits, but the streams don't necessarily compete, it became almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we had to really claw our way through the traffic in order to get it heard. And then again, like I said, I mean, we talk about it all the time. The radio team at Warner Music Nashville, their job is to get a record played and get the record from zero to research. And then at that point, the research really dictates where you go. And all of the streaming numbers and all of the momentum, you know, that you have elsewhere doesn't mean a lot if that song is not testing. And that's just the truth. And we could get into the conversation about that at another time, but I think that's where we found ourselves with that particular track for Cole.
But I think it's going to be a real number one. And I think it's going to be a real number one, and I think here in a few weeks it's going to jump somebody and ruin their day, and they'll get a pretend number 2, and the world will it'll still spin. We'll be all right.
So just sticking on that track for one more question, I feel like I'm at risk of wearing out my welcome with this particular example. But when the track comes back, as this one has, how do you, MTK, and you, Travis, kind of notice that? And what are your instincts to say, this is real, this is resurged, or, I don't know, it's just some temporary spike because it happened to be in a TV commercial or whatever? How do you know when it comes back like that, is real?
Well, I mean, we can see it in, again, we're watching the marketplace, whether that's sales, streams, airplay, all of those things. Our country curator, I think he's in the room, Kerry Martin, is brilliant. And we're constantly having conversations amongst our team and then also amongst the entire programming staff. And I think Tierney's in the room too. But we're looking at that customer obsession, what is happening in the marketplace, and if we see this spike in voice data. Like in the back end, any manager artist labels on our AM4A, which is Amazon Music for Artists, we have a voice, it's a thermometer, if you will. It's called Daily Voice Index. So it's cold, warm, hot, and on fire. And when we see that thing go to fire, there is something happening. Now, that doesn't mean that this song is going to be around for another 52 weeks, but it means at that moment, our customers are leaning into it, and it is our job as being customer obsessed at Amazon Music to super serve that customer. And it could be that track was seen on Yellowstone, but that's a cultural moment. and we're here to form culture and to make music, country music history together. So, Yellowstone, TikTok moment, commercials, Super Bowl, whatever it is. And there are those spikes where we literally walk into a meeting and all of us go, what happened? And then we kind of all are like, we don't know where this came from, but it's a moment. And the beauty of streaming is that we can change on a dime. We can pivot and give that customer and that country consumer exactly what they want. So for us, we are looking at all of those different metrics, but when something happens, a song comes back, if it's coming back because it's climbing the radio chart, that's great. If it's coming back, Neon Moon has a moment, on TikTok, that's great. If it has a moment on a TV show, that's great. That means that people are looking for it. And if people are leaning into country music, then we all win in this room. So for us, we're just constantly looking at what is happening and how can we super serve that customer.
Good. One more, I promise this will be my last question about Forever to me, but Travis, when that song has come back and showed some resilience, it's not, I think I just said it was number 11 on Country Airplay, something like that. So obviously it's being played heavily. How do you know it's for real this time? How do you know not to go, we went through this before, it was a fake number one?
Well, I mean, we use a system of trending. We don't knee-jerk like some of the other companies do, but trending over time and consistency. But the other thing is, too, that this is a whole other, and I'm not going to get in the weeds, I promise, but Michelle has real-time data with real people. I'm still dealing with the clown shoes that is Nielsen. So there's a whole other element here that messes with what we're trying to do. And so we have to trend things, and we have to make really sure we're right with a tiny group of people, and at the same time programming to people that are never going to be part of the ratings. And that's that can be fun. So I think trending is important to answer your question, even though long-windedly I got off track there. But trending is really important in my game.
Let me follow up, Travis, and ask you a data question. I'm always curious about this with radio because you have so many different metrics. You have the metrics that all of us see, which is streaming and YouTube and on and on and on. And then, but you also have some specific data that you pay for, like Nielsen and various things, and those are really carved up. And I just wonder, is one more influential than the other? Is the PPM? Do you feel like that whole Nielsen device is just as strong as it's always been made out to be? I mean, what data points are credible to you, and what data points do you maybe trust less?
Man, come on, I'm trying to behave. We got private citizens, almost people putting people on the moon, and we can't accurately tell how many people are listening to the radio. I mean, that is crazy to me. So we're in a thing where we've got to find good research companies and constantly be all over them about the screener, constantly about how they're screening people in and out, and still we get wobbles all over the place. At least when we look at the streaming data, it is more consistent and it is more stable on, but that's where it goes back to 35 minutes ago when I was talking about know the streaming in your market at a granular level so you can see when something actually moves. And so our music meetings are really long. They're longer than I think most people think. But it's because we have the added Nielsen thing. We're trying to get people to listen for 3 minutes at a time. We could look at M-score. We won't get in the weeds on that. But we have almost too much to look at. I think you've got to, over time, figure out what works in your market that's delivering the intended result, whether it makes sense or not in this Nielsen world.
So Kristen, having just heard what Travis said, when you go to him or his colleagues to try to break a hit and get them to play it regularly on the radio, how do you choose which data points to emphasize and which not to emphasize? And you must know some things have credibility, some things don't have credibility.
Yeah, and I think that's the answer. I think the goal of my team and my hope certainly is that the people that are calling on radio stations every week, daily, know the ins and outs of that particular market, and they know the ins and outs of that particular radio station so that we're not wasting anyone's time. I don't want to bring data to a programmer who doesn't value that particular data. And so it's up to my team to understand where to start, when to pivot, and how then to navigate all of the different things that our programmers are looking at to make music decisions.
Good. Let's see. There's something that I've been thinking about. I did a panel this morning, and Telia from Spotify was on the panel, and there were some label people and some managers. There was a manager on the panel, and they were talking about how in country right now, artists can break from anywhere. You know, it can be all over the world. Streaming has sort of like made the world smaller in that regard. Zach Bryan, I think, is a somewhat recent example of this. He didn't come up through the traditional route. And I guess I just wonder if all three of you can address the idea of how do you kind of change the way your companies operate to accommodate this deluge of this person is breaking from Australia and this person is breaking from India, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, maybe start with Kristen with that question? I mean, because that has A&R implications too.
Yeah, certainly. And the amount of data that we, the incoming and the ways that artists are breaking, to your point, is incredibly different from one artist to the next. Zach is a really good case in that, probably the first time that I can think of in the country format that an artist is able to play stadiums without what I would call a hit at country radio. And again, it's our job to find how those artists are breaking and then move it into every single category within the ecosystem of that artist. An example, Braxton Keith has a song called Cozy, and it had a viral moment, a legitimate viral moment at TikTok. And often, we don't necessarily see that UGC create or that TikTok momentum move into the streaming space. But in this case, we were starting to see our streaming numbers also go up, which for us was very exciting, and it made us pounce immediately. We looked at the UGC increasing, it's translating to streams, so my streaming team immediately jumped in with our streaming partners and said, you guys gotta pay attention. Look at what's happening with Braxton, which ultimately then led for some playlist opportunities for that particular track for Braxton, which then again just leads to more avenues and more ways of artist discovery. Braxton is an artist that we're not yet talking about bringing to country radio, but those are the conversations that we're having daily as far as artist discovery, so that when I do come to you, and we will, you guys have heard of Braxton. One of the things that we say all the time, and it's a very common statement in our building right now, is I am trying to create pull, not push. I don't want to push things on you. I would rather you pull them from me. And that's our job every day.
Makes sense. MTK, do you want to take a whack at that question? I mean, there's so much stuff flooding in from all over everywhere. How do you that must be what you do every day, work on sifting through it.
Yeah, and I think the first part of your question was, since it's global, how have we kind of pivoted? And we really haven't pivoted because we are a global company. So globally, we try to align with, our global head of programming is here right now. The person who is, programming Country Heat right now is also programming Canada. So we're constantly looking at the global market, also the US market, also what's happening, countries having such a moment, and I know we keep saying that, but really, even last year, being able to speak to our different territory leads, so someone who is programming in the UK, or someone who is programming in Australia, or leading marketing in Canada, we get to talk to all of them because, Morgan Wallen did ex-US touring, Luke Combs did ex-US touring. Kane Brown did ex-US touring. We have C2C that's exploding now. We have CMC in Australia that's exploding now. So for us, we're constantly looking at all of those territories because we are, Amazon Music is globally a company, on top of the fact that we have, Twitch is underneath the Amazon umbrella, and Twitch is globally available. So when, last year we were the exclusive partner with Stagecoach, that was streamed globally. When we are the exclusive streaming partner for the ACMs, that's streamed not only on Twitch, but Prime Video and within the Amazon Music app. So we're trying to and continue to reach those global territories and be available and just expose this music and expose this fandom to those people in those territories. And luckily, because of all of the work that we're doing, that's happening on a global level. So it's really cool that we get to take advantage of that momentum and see also these non-traditional multi-genre festivals booking a Zach Bryan, booking a Luke Combs. I think that speaks to all of the work that we're all doing in this room and outside these doors. But on a global level, we get to lean into all of it.
You want to take a whack at that, Travis? When these songs come from everywhere, and they get to you, does it change the way you do your job at all?
Well, first, Mr. Global Head of Everything, super smart. You should put her in charge of more stuff, bro. I'm just telling you. Just telling you. She'll do you right. Yeah, we care. Not exactly on that subject, but there's a lot of people that stream that can't sell a ticket. And I think that's important in our game. But it's also great that they stream and they can sort of have a career. That's what makes it tough. I do find Amazon's data incredibly realistic. I think there's a lot less fuckery when it comes to your platform than the others. And I know everybody will claim, oh, it doesn't happen. They can sniff out the troll farms. But I would say we look at the playlists all the time individually. And I will say this, is theirs is very stable, very realistic. And I'm not dumping on anybody else. I'm just saying if you want one that is consistently accurate to reality, I do think it's Amazon for what that's worth.
Thanks, Travis.
See, I said some nice stuff
So
about
nice.
streaming.
Are we
We can
friends?
still
Really
be
did.
We're all
friends.
friends.
You're going to get a raise after
I'm
this.
going to make a
MTK.
friendship bracelet. It's gonna
But
be
on the
great.
global note, Zach Bryan's a unicorn. There's very few of those. I don't care what happens anywhere except for Nashville, Tennessee. I really don't. And I don't care. I would say that individually for all of my team's markets. I care what happens in Atlanta or Dallas or anywhere we have radio stations. If we don't have a brand there that we're trying to win, I don't care what's happening there. I don't. It's not my game. Don't care. Not even a little bit.
Okay.
No good? Is this
Yeah.
almost done? What are we doing here? What time is it?
How much time do we have? We have another 5 minutes or so? I think we have about 5 more minutes. Because it started late, so I'm confused. But anyway, let's see. Let's end on the note of something that MTK was telling me before the panel, which is we are in a moment where country is big. In the context of other genres, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we might have said hip hop was the dominant genre. I think country is making a case for it now. How do the three of you, if at all, and your industries kind of work together to keep pushing it forward, to keep raising it up? And do you even think of that as your job?
We love, to Kristen's point, we love when we're hearing all of the data and all of the stories too with these artists that are touring ex-US, or hey, this just popped in the UK, or hey, this popped in Australia, this popped in Canada, this popped in Germany, we're having this moment in Japan. There's all of those things help us. And when we are in these rooms with these multi-genres, whether it's a global programming meeting, or whether it's a sales meeting, or at Amazon, so Amazon Music and Amazon, we have so many different verticals, whether it's a Ring doorbell, or it's, an Alexa device voice ad, or it's something like that. And so internally, I'm also advocating for country artists to get those spots, right? So there's a perfume campaign that just came out, or whatever, how do I make sure that the song that's going to go with that is going to be a country song so that I can then leverage that? So having, I'm just going to make this up, Kristen, but having Kristen be like, Gabby Barrett, it loves French perfume. And I'm like, yes, well, we have a French perfume that's about to launch on Amazon.com, and this team came to me, and da-da-da-da-da. And so we get to connect those dots, too, to not only drive streams and, streaming and music and all of that, but under the Amazon Music and the Amazon.com umbrella, we also get to drive artist revenues and build their business on our service. So those are kind of the ways that we get to be in that room. And I think any time that any of us can advocate for country to have a seat at the table, or even have a place in the list of things that you're working on, or whether it's a music festival that's multi-genre, or it's a product, or it's a commercial, or whatever it is, anytime that we can advocate for country, then we all win. So for me, I'm constantly needing those stories from Kristen and her team to say, oh, okay, I'm connecting the dots, and this makes sense, and I can sell it, and I can take that spot for me and not give it to whoever artist, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just to echo what she said, we are all champions of this format. We live it every day. We believe in it. We believe in our artists. We believe in the music, and we believe in each other as far as what we bring to the table in our different, facets of the industry. And when country music is strong, what MTK does at Amazon is strong, and what Travis is doing at Cumulus is strong, and we all win together. And whether it's a song traveling globally or not, it's up to us to provide those opportunities for those particular artists so that all boats rise, right, at the same time.
Good. Travis, do you want to end on the same note of unity?
Nope, their answers are way better than what I would have said, so let's just end on a positive note.
Good. I think that's all we have. Thank you very much to CRS and for our esteemed, wonderful panelists. And thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Enjoy the conference. Stay warm.